Hi, and thanks for joining. If you're new here, I'm Wendy and this is Nina's Jewels. My husband and I buy things at garage sales, flea markets, thrift stores, just about anywhere we can find things to sell online and flip for a profit. If that's content you're interested in, you're in the right place. Today's video is going to be the 8 reasons why I block an eBay buyer. Let's get started. The first reason why I might block an eBay buyer is if they accept an offer or make a purchase and then never pay. This happens more often than I'd like to admit. And if you're an eBay seller, I'm sure this has happened to you too. Unfortunately, if an eBay buyer makes an offer or makes a purchase on eBay and then they don't pay, as sellers, we have to wait 4 days before we can cancel that sale. I think 4 days is a ridiculously long amount of time to wait. Why does a buyer need 4 days to pay? Like four days to me is way too long. And I think eBay needs to rethink that. eBay, if you're watching this, and I seriously doubt you are, but if you're watching this, 4 days, seriously, who needs 4 days? 4 days is way too long. Basically, that buyer is holding my item hostage for 4 days. And no one else gets to see that item, consider buying that item, put that item in their cart, think about making a purchase on my item. That item is just lost to the world for 4 days and nothing gets to happen with it. And I bet if I did the math and, did all the statistics, which I'm never gonna do, but I bet if I did it, and I bet there is somebody who's done it out there, that most buyers who have not paid after 2 days don't pay. There's probably some math head out there who's done all of the numbers, run all of the numbers on this, and it shows that most people who don't pay after 2 days are, some very large percentage not going to pay for their item. So in my opinion, in my humble opinion, eBay, 2 days is as long as any buyer needs to pay. And also, what happened to the program, to this immediate pay program that eBay very boastfully talked about them rolling out? Because that never really happened for me. I very occasionally will see an offer from a buyer that states this buyer has a payment on file and they'll be able to pay immediately. But most of the offers that I receive, I'm waiting for them to pay. So I don't know what happened to that, but that is a reason why I will block a buyer, is if they accept an offer and never pay and I have to wait out the 4 days very frustratingly. And then I'm blocking that buyer. I don't want to go through this again. So they get added to my block list. In fact, I would say that the majority of the buyers on my block list are non-paying buyers. And also I just wonder, how many times a buyer has to go through the non-paying buyer process and get reported before eBay just shuts down their account. Isn't that weighing down the eBay system? I mean, probably not, because that's probably all being done by bots. I don't know. What am I wasting my time thinking about this stuff for? So the number 2 reason why I will block an eBay buyer is that they accept an offer or make a purchase and then immediately ask to cancel. Now, there is one exception to this, and that's if they have a really, really good reason. But the only really, really good reason I can think of, I'm sure there is another really, really good reason, but the only really, really good reason I can think of is that they had the wrong address in eBay. And this has happened once, where somebody bought something and they said, oh, I've just moved, I haven't updated my address in eBay. And I said, okay, no problem. Please cancel, or I'm going to cancel your order, update your address, and then rebuy the item. And that all happened, and they repurchased the item. So that's an example of somebody asking to cancel or somebody canceling an order for a very valid reason. And, I did not block that buyer, obviously. So that was a very valid reason. But most of the time when somebody asks to cancel, it's because they just bought the item willy-nilly, didn't even look at the listing, and then looked at the listing after they purchased the item and realized, oh, this item is the wrong size. Or there was something wrong with the item and I didn't actually read the listing, even though the listing title said read. Whatever reason, that they give for canceling that is completely ridiculous because they didn't actually look at the listing until after they purchased the item, which is incredibly frustrating to me because they're just wasting my time, because then I have to go in and cancel the item and relist the item and reset up all of my promotions, because for some reason I have to set up the promotion again. eBay doesn't let me set that up automatically. I don't know, maybe I haven't figured that out, but that is a reason why I will block an eBay buyer, is if they make an offer or a purchase and then immediately ask to cancel. That's not somebody I want to deal with on my list. Number 3 reason I will block somebody is if they have given multiple negative or neutral feedbacks. Not multiple negative or neutral feedbacks to me, but if they are serial negative or neutral feedback givers in general. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you don't know how to check this, the way I will figure this out is if I receive an offer. We have offers turned on the majority of our listings, not all of them, but the majority of them. And if I receive an offer from a buyer, before I accept that offer, I have learned the hard way to check their feedback given to others. And this is kind of tricky. eBay doesn't make it easy to do this. You can only do it on a PC. You can't do it on your phone or device. But if you get an offer from somebody, you go to your PC, you click on the offer, you click on the buyer's username, and you go to their feedback page. And then on their feedback page, you click on left for others. And I'll show you here on the screen if I get an offer in the time when I'm editing this video, which likely I will. We get a lot of offers. But you go to left for others, and then you can see all of the feedback that they've left for other buyers. This filters it down to only the feedback that they have left on purchases that they have made. So you can see if they are regular givers of negative and neutral feedback. Because in my opinion, something really egregious has to happen for you to leave negative feedback for someone, especially on eBay. On eBay, you're doing business with a lot of mom and pop type businesses most of the time. So if you're going to leave negative feedback for somebody, I think most buyers know that you would have exhausted all other avenues of support prior to leaving feedback. You would have reached out to the seller to say, hey, I have a problem with my purchase. What can you do to help me out with that? You would have maybe opened a return request and tried to resolve it that way. Perhaps eBay would have gotten involved and tried to mediate between the two of you. And having exhausted all of those other opportunities for resolving your issue, then you would have left negative feedback at that point if everything else didn't work out. So if someone's leaving multiple negative feedbacks and you see that they've left multiple negative feedbacks on their left for feedback, that is a major red flag. That is not somebody that I want to do business with, and I will block them. And even if they've left a few neutral feedbacks with some negative feedbacks, man, that is also a red flag, and probably also not somebody I want to do business with. Even if they've made a really, really good offer to me, it is just not worth risking my account over. So I will generally block that person. And that sounds kind of harsh, but here's one caveat. Sometimes if they've left a couple of negative feedbacks and I see that most of the other feedbacks that they have left are positive, I will do a little bit further research and I will look at the feedback of the person that they left the negative feedback for and see if they have received a lot of negative feedbacks. So I will see, did they leave negative feedback for someone who has a lot of negative feedback? Maybe it was warranted. So if it's questionable, I will give them the benefit of the doubt and do a little bit more research. I don't immediately, say they've left one negative feedback, I'm going to immediately block them. I do give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes and go in and do a little bit more research. But that is definitely a major red flag for me, and I try to be very cautious about people who are loose with their negative feedback. Okay, the fourth reason why I will block somebody on my eBay account is if they ask me a lot of questions that are already answered in my eBay listing. Or if they ask me a lot of questions and I feel like those questions are setting me up for an item not as described return or claim. And I guess I'll give a couple of examples. So let's say I have a listing and it is an electronic item and it doesn't work. I have it listed as is or for parts or repair. I would have as is for parts, repair, I would have that listed in the title. If that was an option in the drop-down condition for parts or repair, I would have that selected. I would have that in the condition details. I would have that in the item details. That would be like everywhere, literally everywhere in my listing. And it would be in all caps. It would be so obvious. There would be no question that this item was for parts or repair only, as is. So if a buyer sent me a question about this particular item and said, does it work? I would be like, I don't think we're going to sell to this person. I would probably just not answer the question and block them, honestly, because I knew, number one, I know that they didn't read the listing. And number two, I would very cynically think they're setting me up to open an INAD claim on me. Another example would be if I was selling a video game case. Let's say I had a Super Mario Brothers case, but I didn't have the game, and I was selling the case only. And in the title, it would say, the name of the game, case only in all caps. It would say in the condition details, case only, in the item description, case only in all caps. And if the buyer sent me a question and it said, does this come with the game? I would be like, nope, not going to do it. They would get blocked. I wouldn't sell to them because they didn't read the listing. They didn't read the listing, and I would have some major red flags that they were going to receive that item and then open a return and say, I didn't get the game with this item not as described. Because that kind of stuff has happened to me in the past, and I guess I'm cynical that way, that I've been scammed too many times. I'm not willing to risk it with people. So the number 5 reason why I will block an eBay buyer is if they return an item for a reason that I feel is unfair. So, we have like what I guess would consider a normal return rate. Our return rate is about 2%, maybe like 2.3% or something like that. Most of the stuff that we get returned is clothing, but we get other, various things returned. And most of the time it's for valid reasons. It doesn't fit. It just didn't work out. I didn't like it. Buyer's remorse kinds of things, or it didn't fit. And those are valid reasons. People can return items. If we're getting back the exact same item that we sent out in the same condition that we sent it out in, we accept returns. That is part of doing business, and we will accept returns happily. But if somebody is trying to rip me off on the return, then I have a problem with that. And I'll give an example of somebody who tried to rip me off on a return. And it was somebody who opened an item not as described claim. It was on a pair of shoes. And I have a suspicion that she purchased the shoes and wore the shoes. and then claimed that I sent her the wrong size of shoes, and opened an item not as described claim and said that we sent her the wrong size of shoes. And I was like, that is not the case. I'm pretty sure, I make mistakes, obviously, but I don't think I made a mistake on this listing. I just thought it was a weird issue to have. And also she had the items she had the shoes for like the most amount of time she could have before she opened the return. It was just, everything was suspicious about it. So anyway, she opened the return, and when we got the shoes back, they were not the wrong size. They were listed correctly. So I ended up blocking her and reporting her to eBay for misuse of the item not as described program. We got our money back on the return shipping. So that ended up working out in our favor. I don't really know. I reported her. I don't know what happened with her, but we got our money back. So I guess that's all that matters to us. The number 6 reason why I will block an eBay buyer is if they try to extort me on a partial refund unfairly. Now, I will say that there are a few rare occasions where I will give a partial refund to a buyer if I have made an egregious mistake and they are able to prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt. So I can't really think of any examples right now off the top of my head, but there have been a few times where I have messed something up. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, and I have occasionally messed up, and a buyer has pointed out my mistake, and I've given them a partial refund, and we've worked out a deal. But most of the time, I don't give partial refunds, and the reason why is that I think that there are times when buyers can try to scam you with partial refunds. And I think that not giving partial refunds can dissuade buyers from making fraudulent claims. So, there are times when buyers can claim that the item is broken or damaged or not working and try to get you to give a partial refund, especially with electronics and stuff. And then you give a partial refund and you basically are giving that on the word of the buyer. So in situations like that, I try to not give a partial refund and say, no, I want you to open a return request and send the item back to me, and then you'll get a full refund. And in that case, I would rather just pay for the return shipping to have the item sent back to me rather than get scammed by somebody who is making a fraudulent claim. And I've also found that most buyers who are being truthful really have no problem with sending back a broken item. If I'm paying for the return shipping, they don't have a problem sending back the broken item for a full refund. If they're getting frustrated about it, not wanting to send you pictures of the broken item, or saying, I don't really want to go to the trouble of sending the item back, that's when you kind of have to be wary and think, oh, well, maybe this item isn't really broken, and really put your foot down and say, no, you need to send the item back, because that's when you might be getting scammed. So if they are trying to extort me for a partial refund and I feel that that's unfair, or maybe they're not being truthful, I will block that buyer. So the number 7 reason why I will block an eBay buyer is if they left unfair feedback. And this is, we've only gotten negative or neutral feedback maybe like 2 or 3 times. We only have 1 neutral feedback on our account right now and 1 negative feedback on our account right now. And I mean, I'm sure everybody says this, but I think both the negative and definitely the negative feedback was unfair. And really both of them were unfair. I'm sure everybody says their negative and neutral feedbacks are unfair, but, and also my children are beautiful. So, but this neutral feedback was definitely unfair. At least it was unfair in the way it was done. Whether the information in the feedback was true or not, I have no idea, because the buyer was like incommunicado with me. And that is what I feel was unfair about the feedback. But this buyer received their item and then left neutral feedback about the item without contacting me first. And that's what I felt was unfair about it. Normally, like I said earlier, if the buyer has an issue with their purchase, they would reach out to you and say, hey, item was received damaged, or I received the item and it didn't match the photos. Is there something you can do about it? And we will always try to work out something with the buyer. Unfortunately, this buyer didn't do that. They just left us neutral feedback. It was in regards to a sports trading card, and they said the corner was dinged up. Luckily, they did leave us neutral feedback instead of negative, but I was frustrated that they just left us this feedback that said the corner was dinged up. And I was like, as you can see in my response, I was like, well, we were never given the opportunity to make it right. Had you contacted us, we would have happily given you a refund. I think the card was only like $2. We would have just given him a refund and everything would have been good and he would have been happy. But he or she just left negative feedback and we were not given the opportunity to do anything about it. And upon further researching into this account, they are a serial negative and neutral feedback leaver, and I'll show you some of their feedback page, some of their left for others feedback page. You can see that they leave lots of negative and neutral feedback, and that is the resounding comment on many other people's responses to them, is that they were not given any opportunity to make it right with them. They just left the feedback without even contacting them. So it's extremely frustrating when this kind of thing happens and you aren't given an opportunity to fix it. So that is when I will block a buyer, and I've definitely blocked this buyer. And if you sell collectible cards or collectibles of any kind, you might want to block this buyer too. And the 8th and final reason why I will block an eBay buyer is if they claim that they did not receive their item when tracking shows it was delivered, or if they start complaining rudely that they have not received their item yet when tracking shows that it was still in transit and maybe it's just running a couple of days late. I mean, this has happened a handful of times. If you're a seller, I know this has happened to you. The buyer says, I didn't get my item. You check tracking and it says delivered. You're like, well, I don't know what to tell you, but it says that it was delivered. And you go through the whole list with them. Have you checked with your neighbors? Did you check with your spouse or whoever lives with you to make sure that they didn't pick it up and put it in the other bedroom? That actually has happened where we said, it says it was delivered, and they were like, well, no, I didn't get it. And then it just turns out that it was sitting in the other room and their spouse got it and put it in the other room and they didn't know it was in there. So, sometimes you just kind of have to go through the list with them. Check with your mail carrier and see if maybe they might have delivered it to another house. The mail carriers have GPS technology now. They can find the exact location of the package. So, you just kind of have to go through the list with them and help talk them through the options. The good news is that eBay will back the seller up. This is the one and only type of incident that I have had where eBay has consistently backed me up as a seller. And that is when the tracking shows that the item is delivered and the buyer claims that it's not there. eBay consistently will back up the seller in this circumstance. If the buyer opens a claim on you and says that the item was not delivered and you have tracking showing that it was delivered, eBay will back you up as a seller. So that's the good news there. If the tracking shows that the item is still in transit and running a little bit late, I just usually ask the buyer politely to remain patient. Sometimes the post office was running a little bit late, and I offer to keep my eye on the item for them. Every day or so, I'll check back in with the buyer and say, hey, I've been looking at the tracking and the item states that it's at this location. It looks like it's still moving. If it's not moving, I will sometimes file a lost package claim with the post office. That sometimes will actually get the post office to get the item moving a little bit. That actually does work sometimes on getting the package moving, and it appeases the buyer. And if the package hasn't made it and is at least a week late, we will either refund the buyer depending on the cost of the item, or make a decision on what we're going to do at that point. But that is a reason why I will block the buyer, is if they claim the item was not received when it was clearly delivered. That is not somebody that we want to do business with. Although, you know, I don't block them always immediately in that situation. I will give them a chance to locate the item, go through the whole process, and if they find it and if they're nice about it, I won't necessarily block them. But if they, you know, really raise a stink and act ugly about everything, I'll usually end up blocking them if they cause me a lot of trouble. So those are the 8 reasons why I block people on eBay. You might ask why I'm really quick to block people, but I actually don't think I'm very quick to block people. I try to only block people who I feel are risky to my account. I've worked really hard to maintain my eBay account, and I definitely think bad buyers can destroy your account quicker than you even know. So I am not willing to risk it at all with bad buyers. I don't take any chances at all. We do try to ensure that our products and our experience is at a standard where nobody would even want to leave negative feedback. But I do feel like that there are dishonest buyers out there who use feedback extortion, threatening negative feedback as part of their scam. So if I have a bad feeling about a buyer or a transaction, and if there's data to back that up, I will definitely block somebody. It's just better safe than sorry, that's for sure. It's easier to prevent negative feedback than to have it removed. And on eBay, if you get a negative feedback or a neutral feedback, you have to wait a full year for that to fall off of your account. So I would rather prevent it than have to worry about having it on there. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give us a like. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below with the notification bells turned on so you can be kept informed of all of our latest content. If you want to support our channel, consider checking out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. And we will see you guys on the flip side. Thanks so much. Bye.